Emma had always believed in love, the kind that's unbreakable, binding two people so closely that they become each other's better halves, sharing life's highs and lows without a doubt or a second thought, and her love for Mark had been exactly that, a story that felt like it had been pulled from a fairy tale. But one night, everything she thought she knew about loyalty, family, and trust would change forever in ways she never could have anticipated, ways that would shake her faith to its core. And it began with a seemingly innocent gathering at her father-in-law's house, an annual family tradition they looked forward to every year. But that evening, as they sat in the dimly lit living room reminiscing and laughing, Robert's hand lingered a moment too long on her shoulder, an action so brief it could have been dismissed as nothing, and she did, brushing it off as a figment of her imagination. Yet as the night wore on, she couldn't shake the unease creeping into her chest, that sense of something unsaid lurking beneath the surface, and this feeling grew stronger over the next few months as Robert's seemingly friendly gestures became more frequent and more personal, like the time he found her alone in the kitchen and rested his hand just a bit too low on her back, his fingers grazing her in a way that made her stomach turn, yet he acted as if nothing happened, as if she was overreacting to a simple touch, and Emma told herself it was harmless, that she was probably misinterpreting an innocent gesture, but deep down, something inside her was cracking, a fracture in the foundation of her trust, and she tried confiding in Mark, telling him that his father had been making her uncomfortable, but he laughed it off, insisting that she was just imagining things, that his father would never act inappropriately, which left her feeling isolated, questioning her own perception, her instincts, and with no one to validate her feelings, Emma began to retreat into herself, avoiding family gatherings, making excuses not to be alone in Robert's presence. Yet the advances continued, subtle and manipulative, like the time he brushed a stray hair from her cheek, his fingers lingering a little too long, his gaze a little too intense, making her skin crawl, but every time she tried to pull away, he managed to gaslight her, dismissing her discomfort with a smirk, a casual comment that made her doubt herself even more, and it was tearing her apart inside, the weight of this secret she couldn't share, the fear of confrontation, the anxiety gnawing at her every time she saw him, and one day, the unthinkable happened. She found herself alone with Robert in the hallway after a family dinner, and he leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear as he whispered words that turned her blood to ice, propositions veiled in casual conversation, innuendos hidden in jokes, and she froze, unable to move, unable to process the betrayal, feeling her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces, because this wasn't just anyone, this was her husband's father, a man she had once respected, trusted, even admired, and now he was turning her life upside down with his twisted games, leaving her trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. And that night, as she lay next to Mark, the words burned on her tongue, but she couldn't bring herself to speak, because she knew he wouldn't believe her, not after he'd dismissed her concerns so many times before, and the pain of his disbelief hurt almost as much as Robert's betrayal, leaving her feeling more alone than ever, as if she were caught in a web of lies and deceit with no way out. So she decided to gather proof, to find a way to expose Robert's true intentions, and she began to document every interaction, recording his words, capturing his touches, until finally she had enough evidence to confront him, and she did. One afternoon when they were alone in the house, and as she played the recordings back to him, watching his face turn pale, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a vindication for all the nights she'd spent questioning her own sanity, and yet, even then, he didn't apologize, he didn't admit his wrongdoing, instead, he turned it back on her, threatening to twist the story, to tell Mark a fabricated version of events that would paint her as the aggressor, the unfaithful one, a threat so devastating she felt the ground shift beneath her feet, as if her entire life were crumbling before her eyes, but she refused to let him win, she refused to let his lies destroy her marriage, so she went to Mark, heart pounding, hands shaking, and she laid everything bare, showing him the evidence, hoping, praying he would believe her, and after a long, tense silence, he finally did, and while the damage was done, the scars would remain. The pain of betrayal and broken trust would linger for a lifetime. Emma knew she had taken back control of her life, reclaiming her voice, her truth, and though their relationship with Robert was forever shattered, she and Mark moved forward, united in the aftermath, determined to rebuild what had been broken, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. But healing was not simple, not even close. After that confrontation, Mark distanced himself from Robert, cutting all ties, but the damage had already seeped into every corner of Emma's life. Every family gathering became a painful reminder, a reminder of how someone she once trusted had betrayed her, and as she looked around at friends and family who didn't know the truth, she felt like an outsider in her own life, harboring a dark secret she'd never wanted. Mark, on the other hand, struggled in ways she didn't expect. He was torn, furious with his father yet broken-hearted over the loss of the relationship he once cherished. Their home, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed weighed down with invisible shadows, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Conversations were strained, each one laced with unspoken words, and in the quiet of the night, Emma could feel Mark's grief pulsing between them, a chasm neither of them knew how to bridge. She wanted to move forward, to forget, but trauma doesn't fade so easily. It haunted her dreams, twisted her thoughts, turned love into suspicion, and there were times she found herself questioning whether she had done the right thing, whether exposing the truth had been worth the pain. Yet every time she caught herself slipping into those doubts, she reminded herself of the courage it took to stand up, to reclaim her voice in a situation designed to silence her. Mark tried to support her, he really did, but his own heart was torn, and in moments of vulnerability, he'd admit he missed his father, missed the man he thought he knew, and she'd feel a pang of guilt, wondering if she'd somehow destroyed something sacred by bringing the truth to light. This guilt festered, feeding into her insecurities, making her question her own worth, as if she had been the one at fault. Months passed, and though they tried counseling, the memories lingered, becoming a silent third presence in their marriage. Friends and family sensed the tension, and they began to withdraw, confused by the changes they couldn't understand, leaving Emma and Mark more isolated than ever. Yet in the midst of this darkness, they found brief moments of light. They took up new hobbies, found ways to reconnect, and slowly, very slowly, began to build something new. It wasn't the life they'd dreamed of, but it was a life they were creating together, one built on honesty, resilience, and a determination to never let betrayal define them. As Emma and Mark continued their journey toward healing, they discovered that the process was anything but linear. Some days were calm, almost normal, and for a few hours, they'd let themselves believe that life could be as it once was. But other days, the pain resurfaced, sharp and fresh, as if the wound had just been reopened. Emma found herself avoiding certain places that reminded her of Robert, even stores they used to frequent as a family. The memories were like ghosts, haunting her in unexpected moments, during simple errands, in quiet car rides, even when she was washing dishes. She could almost feel Robert's presence looming, like an echo she couldn't shake. Mark noticed her quiet moments, the way she'd drift into silence mid-conversation, lost in her own thoughts. He'd reach out to comfort her, yet his touch, once so familiar and warm, felt distant, as though they were both still learning to trust each other again. Their intimacy suffered, and they both knew it, but neither of them had the words to fix it. Mark was careful, gentle, and patient, but Emma could see the pain in his eyes, the regret he carried for not believing her sooner. It was a silent remorse that weighed heavily on both of them. An unspoken apology she wished she didn't need but appreciated nonetheless. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, Mark took her hand and suggested a getaway, just the two of them, far from everything that reminded them of the past. They rented a small cabin in the mountains, a place surrounded by nature, peaceful and untouched. For the first time in months, they both felt a sense of release, a small glimmer of freedom from the weight they'd carried. They spent their days hiking, exploring trails, cooking together, and laughing over silly things they'd forgotten they could enjoy. And in those quiet, secluded woods, Emma felt a piece of herself coming back, a part she thought she'd lost forever. Mark seemed lighter too, his laughter genuine, his eyes soft and filled with something close to hope. One night, as they sat by the fire, Mark opened up about the pain he'd hidden, the conflict he'd felt, torn between loyalty to his family and loyalty to Emma. He admitted that he had spent months in self-doubt, feeling as if he had failed her in the worst possible way by not protecting her from his own father. Emma, in turn, shared her own battles, the shame and guilt that had haunted her, the feeling that she'd somehow destroyed their family even though she knew, rationally, it wasn't her fault. They held each other through tears, through moments of silence where words were unnecessary, and in that vulnerability, they found a new closeness, a trust deeper than they'd ever felt before. Returning home was easier after that trip, though life was still far from perfect. They resumed counseling together, determined to rebuild with honesty at the center of everything they did. Mark reached out to his mother, who had been devastated by the family's division, and while he didn't share all the details, he made it clear that his loyalty was to Emma. Slowly, the support from his mother and other family members grew, creating a network that reminded them they weren't alone. Over time, Emma and Mark found new traditions, creating memories that were just theirs, untarnished by past shadows. They embraced simple moments, long walks, shared books, quiet dinners, and those moments became the foundation of their healing. Emma began to find purpose in helping others who had experienced betrayal, volunteering with support groups, sharing her story, and finding strength in the resilience of others. Mark, too, found ways to give back, channeling his pain into projects that mattered to him, rediscovering parts of himself he had neglected. In time, they both learned that forgiveness wasn't always about excusing someone else's actions but rather about freeing themselves from the burden of anger and hurt. They chose to let go of the bitterness, not for Robert's sake but for their own peace, so they could move forward without a shadow over their lives. Though they knew scars would remain, those scars became reminders of their journey, a testament to what they'd endured and how they'd grown. As months turned into years, Emma and Mark discovered a love that was no longer defined by innocence but by resilience, acceptance, and an unbreakable bond formed in the fires of adversity. As the years passed, Emma and Mark's lives took on a new shape, one they never would have envisioned but one that brought them a sense of peace and fulfillment they hadn't thought possible. They'd moved to a different city, a fresh start that allowed them to leave behind not only the physical reminders of the past but also the emotional baggage tied to their old home. They chose a place filled with sunlight and open spaces, a little house surrounded by trees, where they could build new memories untainted by the past. In this new chapter, they focused on simple joys, prioritizing the little things they had once taken for granted. Sunday mornings spent reading together, evenings filled with cooking experiments, and long walks through nearby parks where they could lose themselves in conversation or just enjoy the quietness. Both of them had been transformed by their experience, and their relationship was one of those transformations. They had become partners in a way neither of them could have imagined when they'd first met, a partnership forged not out of blind faith but out of a hard-won trust and a deep appreciation for each other's strength. Emma, meanwhile, had found purpose in the strength she'd developed, and with Mark's support, she began to pursue her passion for psychology. She went back to school, working towards a degree that would allow her to help others who had been through trauma, betrayal, and the complex web of emotions that accompanied it. Her own journey had given her insights she knew she could use to make a difference in the lives of others, and it was incredibly healing to turn her pain into something positive, something that could provide hope for people who felt lost and alone. Mark was her biggest cheerleader, helping her through late nights of studying, celebrating her small victories, and reassuring her on the days she doubted herself. Their love had transformed into something much deeper, built on admiration and respect for each other's resilience. In time, they even dared to talk about starting a family. It was a delicate subject, and they approached it with caution, aware of the fears and insecurities it brought up. Emma wondered if she could truly leave the past behind, if she could trust herself to be a good mother without letting her past haunt her. Mark, too, grappled with the idea of parenthood, carrying his own fears of whether he could create a loving environment free from the mistakes of his father. But together, they found the courage to take that leap. When Emma became pregnant, It was a quiet joy, a celebration they shared in their own way, keeping it close to their hearts as they prepared for this new phase of life. The journey to parenthood was one of healing in itself. It was a reminder of life's resilience, of the ability to create something beautiful even out of pain. When their daughter was born, it was as if a new light had entered their lives, one that softened all the shadows of the past. Holding their little girl, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible, a deep, unbreakable love that wrapped around her heart and made all the suffering worth it. Mark, too, found himself transformed by fatherhood, determined to be the kind of father who would always protect, nurture, and believe in his child. They named their daughter Hope, a reflection of what she had given them, the strength to continue, the courage to forgive, and the belief in a future that could be brighter than their past. Their journey wasn't over. They both knew that healing was a lifelong process, one that would continue to challenge them in unexpected ways. But as they built a life filled with new memories, laughter, and the love of their growing family, they found that the scars from their past had faded into gentle reminders of what they had overcome. Together, they had redefined what family meant, building a home grounded in trust, openness, and a fierce dedication to each other. And as they watched Hope take her first steps, laugh, and grow, they felt a sense of pride, not only in their daughter but in the life they had created together, a life marked by resilience, forgiveness, and a love that had truly stood the test of time. As their daughter Hope grew, so did Emma and Mark's sense of fulfillment and purpose. They found that being parents didn't just heal them, it brought new dimensions to their relationship and to their own identities. Each milestone Hope reached, the first words, first steps, the moments of unfiltered laughter, was a fresh layer of joy in their lives, a reminder that beauty could rise from even the darkest parts of their past. As Hope started school, Emma and Mark became involved in their community, meeting other parents, volunteering, and building a support system. They'd established themselves in careers they were proud of. Emma as a counselor, specializing in helping those who had been through traumatic relationships, and Mark in a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting children in need. Their work wasn't just a job, it was a way for them to give back and to share the empathy and understanding they had gained. Emma, in particular, found that her own experiences allowed her to connect with her clients in a profound way. She became known for her compassion and strength, someone who could guide others through the complexities of healing because she had walked that road herself. Her clients appreciated her ability to listen without judgment, to encourage them to find their own voices, and to help them see that life could indeed hold happiness and peace after pain. At home, Mark and Emma worked to create a space that felt like a true sanctuary. They instilled in Hope a sense of love and security, raising her with the openness and honesty they had come to value so deeply. As a family, they embraced traditions that felt right for them. Sunday pancake breakfasts, camping trips, and nightly reading sessions, where they would take turns telling stories or sharing their thoughts. For Emma, every moment with Hope was a reminder of how far she had come, and she vowed never to let the past cast shadows on their future. And yet, every now and then, reminders of Robert would surface. Old family photos or passing mentions from relatives would sometimes stir up emotions, reminding Emma and Mark of the pain they had endured. But with each passing year, those memories softened, losing their power to hurt. They had chosen not to erase the past entirely but rather to learn from it, finding ways to make peace with what they couldn't change. Robert himself had grown more distant from the family, a choice that allowed Emma and Mark to move forward without the constant weight of his presence. He remained a figure from a chapter they'd closed, a lesson in boundaries, resilience, and the strength it took to reclaim their lives. One winter evening, as Emma watched Hope play in the snow outside, bundled up and laughing with abandon, Mark wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. They stood together, silently appreciating the life they had built. In that quiet moment, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the happiness they had found, but for the journey that had brought them here. She realized that, while she would never have chosen the pain she endured, it had ultimately led her to a place of incredible strength and depth. As they watched their daughter grow, Emma and Mark found themselves filled with hope not only for her future but also for their own. They knew that life would always come with its share of challenges and that healing was a process without an endpoint. But they had built a life grounded in trust, love, and the wisdom gained from overcoming hardship. And that foundation, they knew, was unbreakable.